Okay, now we are at question 18 of our business analysis sample paper 1 in this series, where we're going through the sample paper to hopefully get you to a point where you'll be a little bit more ready for your business analysis exams. And specifically in this case, this is in relation to the BCS, the British Computer Society, the exams that they administer and look after. So, as always, let's read through the question and see if we can identify any keywords. Let's see if we can identify any techniques or areas of knowledge from our studies, and then look at this in terms of the context of the actual scenario that is being asked here, because it's business analysis practice. It's it's more about sort of the practical elements of business analysis. And we then also carefully look at the instructions and identify what they are actually wanting from us. Then once we've established all of that, we look through the options and we look to see if we can identify the correct option from the list. Okay, so let's have a read. It says, Cafe Croissant is investigating whether to introduce an app allowing customers to order at their table. Olivia has been asked to consider the feasibility of the proposal. Which of the following should Olivia take into account in doing this? Select all that apply. Then we've got 4 options here. It says, A, the company would need to use its overdraft to fund the project. B, the proposed package would require simple, limited customization. C is staff don't understand how the solution works. And D, the exact costs are not known. Okay, so the first thing we can do, so once we've got a little bit of a context, we're starting to understand what the question is starting to ask us. Let's try and see if we can identify any techniques or keywords. So it says, Cafe Croissant is investigating whether to introduce an app allowing customers to order at their table. Okay, so contextually, we have this restaurant or cafe that is now thinking about using this application which will allow their customers to order at the table. So this is contextually what the proposed solution is for the organization. So if we think about business analysis, there's all different parts of the solution's life cycle, from its inception, conceptually, even right in the beginning stages where business analysis is really prevalent, and when we're even investigating into the problem or the solution, and a proposed solution or an actual product hasn't even been thought about yet. But contextually, this is at a stage, if we think of it in terms of the business analysis life cycle, this is already at a stage where they're already considering this particular app, and they're considering whether they're going to use it or not. So we now have Olivia, who is potentially a business consultant or a business analyst, that has now been asked to consider the feasibility of the proposal. So she may be an internal consultant, an external business analyst that's been hired in, but she's now assessing this proposed solution to see if it's aligned, if the solution is aligned with the organization. Is it going to be worth the organization's while to actually use this application or not? Okay, so she now if we now look at this, I can already identify 3 keywords, specifically 2. So investigating. So this is now talking about part of using our analysis to look into a particular solution or such, but it's not necessarily in the context of our investigation techniques. But what we can do is we can always look at our business analysis service framework and try to think of what would this fit into best in terms of what is being asked of the business analyst in this particular assignment. But we can see there that there's another 2 keywords that jump out to me. One is feasibility and the other is proposal. So when feasibility is being spoken about in the context of business analysis, more often than not, they are talking about the feasibility assessment. And then when we think of the term there that is used, the keyword proposal, if we think of the word proposal, this is very in line with the context of a business case. So in a business analyst assignment, often the business analyst at the stage of the business analysis lifecycle, they will need to develop the business case, which is basically the justification for the project or the transformation in the organization. So they would have already analyzed the business, thought of all the solutions, evaluated all these options, and the business case is at the point where they are now presenting the options to the organization or the senior managers or the decision makers of the organization. But before we carry out business analysis, before we propose a business case, before we go up and in front of a whiteboard, we talk about the different solutions and why they should select all those various options, or hand over PDF if it's in that kind of context, where it's saying that this is what we suggest and these are alternative options. Before we get to that stage, we need to carry out a feasibility assessment on each of the options, on each of the proposed solutions, to see if the solution is truly aligned with the organization. Is it viable? Is it truly viable from different perspectives? Is it going to be worth our while actually doing it? Is it feasible? So this contextually here is indicating that this is the context of the situation. So this particular proposal of the app is the option that's been presented, and it's about to go into a proposal for a business case, but a feasibility assessment needs to take place here. And it says, which of the following should Olivia take into account in doing this? So now it's asking us about her particular actions. What are the best what are the best actions or proposals? What information should she take from this feasibility assessment moving forward? So we now need to think about the feasibility assessment and what we know about it and how do we actually do it, and then tie it to this context and see if any of these options here are correct or not. So we now so if we think of the business analysis service framework, we know that we have one of the services that is the feasibility assessment and the business case. They're tied to each other. They go together. And we then have to ask ourselves, what is a feasibility assessment? What do we do? What is it? We know that we can just contextually, we can generally think of a solution. We can say, is it going to work for the organization or not? That's the main question that we're actually asking here. But we need to go into more detail to really establish, to see if it's aligned with the business. And what we need to do is we need to do this from three perspectives. These are from the technical, the business, and the financial feasibility perspectives. So we need to look at all these different feasibility perspectives and see if the solution is technically, can it fit into the organization? Is it viable? Are we capable of actually using this app in this organization, this Cafe Croissant organization? Is it financially viable? Can we actually afford it? And if we do use it, is it going to continue being affordable in the future? Or are we going to get a return on investment from it? So that's the question that we may want to ask from a financial feasibility perspective. Then we also have the business feasibility perspective, which we have to ask ourselves, does it match the business objectives? So if this app, let's say it had a different objective. Let's say that the business itself were thinking of selling the organization, and this app would have had no impact to that sale, to that transition. Maybe it was being sold to a Starbucks or to some other franchise. They were buying the property, the premises. Then from a business perspective, the objective of actually selling the organization, it doesn't align with that objective if they're going to sell it, because why would you implement an app when there's going to be a franchise that is going to buy this organization and not use that app? So it would only be business viable from a business perspective if they would be using the app. So those are the three perspectives we need to look at it. From a technical perspective, can it be delivered? From a solution perspective, is it technologically viable? Can it be implemented in the organization? Does the organization have the particular infrastructure in place? And then from a financial perspective, can we afford it? Is it going to provide a return? And then from a business perspective, does it match the business objectives? Okay, so what a feasibility assessment is, it examines the problem or opportunity and the proposed solutions for acceptability and feasibility. So it answers the question, can this really be done, or should it really be done? And also from the context of what required changes are required. So if you think about what needs to be changed in the organization, and will that be acceptable if we were to make these changes to implement this new solution. Okay, and then there's other things that we also need to think about, and that's from a perspective of risk and impact. How's it going to impact the organization, and what risks is it going to present the organization? If it's going to present a certain type of risk, it's going to bring in risk to the organization. How much risk is it going to bring in? Is it going to, is the organization, this cafe croissants, are they going to have to fork out a large sum of money and put themselves in a financially less strong position to implement this application? Is how much risk is the organization going to take on when actually implementing this application? Then, and what impacts is it going to have? Let's say that the people that were actually going to be using this application, let's say the cafe happened to be in a retirement village, and all of the customers were elderly people that were not very used to utilizing new applications and things. And maybe this whole marketing campaign that would be launched to launch this new app may even make the customers feel like they are not aligned with the business themselves, and may feel like this business is not for them. So it could have an impact on the organization. But these are the things that we need to consider from a feasibility perspective. Okay, so if we now look at these answers here, so we have to now think about what should Olivia take into account in terms of doing this feasibility assessment. It says A, the company would need to use its overdraft to fund the project. So what we do is, if you look back to your studies, you look back to those three categories of a feasibility assessment, you will actually see that there are subcategories. And these subcategories very clearly indicate what we should be looking for within the technical, business, and financial feasibility areas. So if those subcategories, first of all, we can look at the main category. If they don't fall in line with the main category, let's say it's looking at it from a completely different perspective, then why would we even consider it from a feasibility perspective? If we are looking at, then if we look at the subcategories, if it doesn't fall in line with those subcategories, then it's obviously not looking at it using that feasibility assessment that you have learned from your book. So if we look at A, it says the company would need to use the overdraft to fund a project. We can already see that this is looking at it from a financial feasibility perspective. Financially, is this app financially feasible? It's because it's looking at, so the company would need to use the overdraft to fund the project. So it's saying it is financially feasible, but this is what would need to take place. This is what we need to consider And this is the impact to the organization too. We can see now we bring in that element of impact here. And if we look at the subcategories, we can see that it's asking the question here, is it within budget? Is there sufficient funds to fund this application, and does this money need to be borrowed? It's looking at it from those types of perspectives, those subcategories of the financial feasibility. Then if we look at B, which says the proposed package would require simple, limited customization. So now it's looking at it from the technical feasibility perspective. So does it align with the business from that perspective? And within the subcategories, you will find a subcategory called compatibility. Is it compatible with the business from a technical perspective? So then we can identify that A and B are part of a feasibility assessment, part of this context where Olivia has been asked to consider these feasibility options. And this is what she's now taking into account in doing this. And once again, in B, we can also see that there's that element of impact that is creeping in there from this consideration. Now, if we look at C, it says that staff don't understand how the solution works. So we can see here that this is more from a maybe an organizational perspective. We don't even know if the staff are the staff that will be using the application. The staff are more, this contextually is indicating that this is the staff that make the coffee, the cafe staff themselves. And the customers are the ones that are going to be using the solution. So this to me contextually doesn't fit in with the three categories of the feasibility assessment. And it also, if you know the subcategories, doesn't fit in with those categories too. So then D, we have the exact costs are not known. And we can even look at this doesn't, if we think of it from a financial perspective, it's not really looking at it from a feasibility perspective, because knowing the costs or not really doesn't make the solution feasible or not. What makes it feasible is if we can afford it, are we going to get a return on investment, or do we need to borrow the funds? That would rather make sense. So from this, we can see that A and B are the correct answers, because we always need to read the instructions carefully. It says select all that apply, and A and B are the correct answers here, and C and D are not. Now, if we just think about feasibility, if we go a little bit further into feasibility, you can also remember that you can use PESTLE for feasibility assessments. You can look at all the categories of PESTLE, the political, the economic, the environment, the social, the technological, the legal perspectives. So this is looking at it from an external perspective, if it's technically feasible or not. We may ask questions within each category. We can say, so the P elements of PESTLE, we can say, is the solution politically acceptable? Then from an economical perspective, is it economically perspective? From a social perspective, is it going to be socially acceptable in the organization, technological, legal, and such? We can also use force field analysis for a feasibility assessment, where we place the solution in the middle, and then we have the positive and the negative factors. So we can see how is it going to be impacted, the solution from both of those perspectives. So I hope that this has given you a little bit more information about feasibility assessments, and in the context of how we as business analysts would be using a feasibility assessment, and why it's used, where it's used, when it's used, and how beneficial it could be within the context of a business analyst assignment. So in the next question, I'm going to be going through question 19. Hopefully I'll see you there.